Dear listeners, before we start today's show, a quick announcement. We are back with a new season of our tech podcast, Our Own Devices by Nandgopal Rajan, a weekly podcast which discusses and dissects trends and reflects on the world of tech in India with the who's who of the tech world. The third season will start on Monday, the 20th of March, and will be available on our website and app and everywhere you get your podcasts. The video version can be seen on our website and the Indian Express YouTube channel. Do tune in every Monday. The link to the show is in the description. Hi, I'm Anwiti Singh and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the USA's new ambassador to India and what his appointment could mean for our country. We also talk about why hundreds of Indian students are facing deportation from Canada. But first, we talk about same-sex marriage equality in India. Last year, a bunch of petitions were filed in the Supreme Court regarding recognizing same-sex marriage under the law. And earlier this week, the central government, while opposing these pleas, told the court that, quote, legislative understanding of marriage in the Indian statutory and personal law regime, unquote, refers only to marriage between a biological man and a biological woman, and any interference, quote, would cause a complete havoc with the delicate balance of personal laws in the country and in accepted societal values, unquote. It also requested the court to leave the matter up for a parliamentary debate. However, yesterday, the Supreme Court referred these petitions seeking legal recognition to same-sex marriages to a 5-judge constitution bench, saying that the matter raises questions of seminal importance. Now, while the centre has been vocal in its stand, the opposition parties have remained rather silent on the issue. In this segment, Indian Express's Manoj joins us to explain why that has been the case and why it seems that they would rather let the court handle the matter. Okay, so Manoj, with its opposition to the same-sex marriage bill in the Supreme Court, the centre's stand is clear that they want the decision to be made in the parliament. But how about some of the major opposition parties? Have they made their opinions public yet?
Now, most of the opposition parties have not made their position clear on this issue. There are a couple of reasons for that. One, we all know the kind of standoff that is on between the opposition and the government in parliament over the Adani issue and over the opposition's claim that investigative agencies are being misused to target political opponents. So they don't want to deflect attention from any of these issues. Secondly, this issue is a touchy topic for most of the parties, especially those from the Hindi heartland. So in the past also, when we saw the court, decriminalizing homosexuality, not many parties came out airing their opinions. We have spoken to many of the leaders. So the refrain of most of the leaders is that we cannot stand up in parliament and debate an issue like this. It's better if the court takes the matter forward like it had done while striking down Section 377 in 2018. Let the court do whatever it wants. We don't want to, get into this topic. Given the cultural sensitivities and all are involved, they don't really want to enter this realm as of now.
And you mentioned the decriminalization of Section 377. Can you tell us how had the Congress reacted to it back then, especially its top leaders?
So the Congress, the top leadership, then Sonia Gandhi was the Congress president. So if we rewind to 2013, when the Supreme Court, reversed 2009 Delhi High Court order that decriminalized same-sex between consenting adults. So the Congress position was enunciated by Sonia Gandhi herself. She expressed a hope that Parliament will address the issue, and even Rahul Gandhi then, who was the number 2 in the party, he phrased it in the manner that he personally believed that these are matters of personal freedom. And Sonia Gandhi then hoped the Parliament would respond in an adequate manner. But nothing happened. If you remember, the UPA government was voted out of office in 2014. The Supreme Court's reversal of that judgment was in 2013. So despite Sonia Gandhi's clear position, despite Rahul Gandhi's clear position, the UPA government could not do anything.
And now talking about the present, you mentioned already that the Congress is avoiding giving a public opinion on the subject. But are there any other opposition parties or, let's say, prominent leaders vocally coming out in the support of marriage equality?
Yeah, we have reached out to leaders across the opposition spectrum. So the most that the Congress officially would say is that, this is hardly an issue to think about now. But that apart, Shashi Tharoor, the Lok Sabha MP from Thiruvananthapuram, he was very clear that he was in support of this, in support of recognition of same-sex marriage. In fact, he says in the event of resistance from the majority, there can be a two-stage process. The first stage being, initially legally enable civil partnerships. These are contract agreements that grant the legal rights of spouses to be same-sex partners. And after seeing how that works in the society, at the second stage, same-sex marriage can be permitted. Even Manish Tiwari, his Lok Sabha colleague, the Congress MP from Anandpur Sahib, was very clear. He says he doesn't speak on behalf of the Congress, but his personal view is that after the Supreme Court read down Section 377 of the IPC, there is no criminality if two people of the same sex cohabit. So given that, a law that legalizes that relationship, he believes should be a natural corollary. And another senior leader, Abhishek Manu Singhvi, he's a senior lawyer. He is in fact one of the lead counsels, arguing that existing law can be read down by courts to subsume same-sex marriage under existing law. So that is as far as Congress is concerned. The CPM has a very clear position on this. We have spoken to Brinda Karat, the Politburo member of the CPM. She said, the party supports the rights of same-sex partners to get a legal recognition, but she believes the present government would not do that, so the court must intervene. When it comes to Trinamool Congress, we are told that the party's floor leader in Rajya Sabha, Derek O'Brien, has already given notice for introducing a private member bill seeking a legalization of same-sex marriage. But his party's views are not very clear. When it comes to other parties, we have contacted the JDU, we have contacted the BRS, we have contacted the AAP, the Shiv Sena. So none of them would come on record to say either way, supporting or opposing. So then the consensus seems to be no comment. That seems to be the consensus in the opposition parties. But off the record, most of the leaders are of the view that if at all something is to be done, it should come from the court so that they don't need to stand up in parliament and debate this bill.
Okay, so far it seems only the government wants the parliamentary debate and the rest would like the matter to be decided by the court. Is that how we should interpret this?
We can interpret that also in a very different manner. The government perhaps knows really well that there will be no consensus on this issue. The parliament will never be able to, pass such a legislation. So it's in a way telling the court not to interfere in this and let the parliament pass a law, consider this matter, knowing fully well that it will be very difficult to arrive at a consensus in parliament. So the matter then remains in a limbo. So if that is a kind of interpretation, the government has already opposed it clearly, in the court. So that is a kind of situation where nothing will move forward from here. The argument being the court should not intervene, the argument being the parliament will take care of it, and there is of course no consensus in parliament and most of the parties will remain silent and divided.
Okay, and now yesterday, the RSS made their stand clear, saying that marriage is only supposed to be between two opposite genders and that they support the government stand. Has the opposition responded to that?
No, of course, the opposition would not respond to the RSS, and the RSS position is not new. Even when the decriminalization of Section 377 was debated, the RSS initially had a different position. They nuanced its position later. The first indication came from the government itself. If you remember, there was a Mental Healthcare Act which the government brought in Parliament in 2017. So in the parliamentary statute, it made it clear that homosexuality is not considered to be a mental illness. So that was an incremental step forward. And the RSS then slightly nuanced its position and saying, like the Supreme Court, we also do not consider this to be a crime, but that was about homosexuality. But second part was that same-sex marriages, it had then said that are not compatible with the norms of nature and we do not support such relations. And they had said that the Indian society, does not have a tradition to recognize such relations. So the RSS position remains the same and the BJP's position remains the same. Given that they are busy cornering the government on the Adani issue and the so-called misuse of the investigative agencies. So it's not high on their agenda, or this is not on the radar of the opposition parties as of now. Now, the situation will change once the court starts hearing the matter. There's already a 5-bench constitution bench has been set up for this. Then the parties will slowly start, revealing their positions. But as I said, most of the parties prefer the court to take a decision on this.
And Manoj, with so many elections lined up this year and the big one in 2024, do you think this can be an issue during campaigning, or is that why it is not on their agendas?
No, this issue I don't think will figure high on the agendas or manifestos of any of these parties. Some of the parties do take liberal positions, but they also have to, deal with how the people at large reacts to this. Now, whether you and I can argue on the merit of that, but that is a calculation, the political calculation, the electoral calculation that parties make. So perhaps it's not time. That is the sense that I get from many of these parties. And given that we are in a crucial election year, there are a string of assembly elections coming up and the big Lok Sabha election is next year. So I don't think the parties would want to make this a big issue, given that they are not very clear how this will play out in villages of India and, among the electorate. So no party would really like to take that risk.
And next, we talk about the USA's new ambassador to India. More than 2 years after his name was finalized, and months after negotiating with the US Senate, Eric Garcetti, the former Los Angeles mayor, has been formally declared as the new US ambassador to India. And his appointment is also important because at a time when global tensions are on the rise, this position was vacant for a while. And another important aspect of the story is that Garcetti is not a career diplomat and has more of a political background. In this segment, Indian Express's associate editor, Shubhajit Roy, joins us to talk about who Eric Garcetti is, how political appointees differ from career diplomats, and what it means for India-US relations. So, Shubhajit, the United States of America has finally announced its ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti. Could you begin by giving us a brief political history of Garcetti?
So, Eric Garcetti was a mayor of Los Angeles, and he's a pure loyalist of Joe Biden, the US president. He was an officer in the US Navy Reserve for about 12 years. And the most fun thing is, about which I've been told the American diplomats in India are very excited, that he's an avid jazz pianist and photographer. I think the piano in the US ambassador's house would finally be put to use by the ambassador. So he has a family, he has a wife and a daughter. When he was elected as the mayor of LA in 2013, he became the city's youngest mayor in 100 years and the first Jew to hold that position. Before that, he served as president at the LA City Council from 2006 to 2012 and a council member.
And there was quite a gap between Garcetti's appointment and the US ambassador to India, right?
Absolutely. So what happened was, once Trump administration was voted out of power, the US ambassador who was appointed by President Donald Trump's administration, Ambassador Kenneth Juster, who in fact gave his only interview before he left office to the Indian Express, he left the position on 20th of January 2 years ago when Joe Biden took office or was sworn in to the president's office. Now, over the last 2 years, the US administration named Eric Garcetti sometime mid-2021. So I think in May, the first time the name was sort of proposed, and then in June or July, there was sort of the actual formal process began. But Mr. Garcetti's name got warped in a controversy regarding an aide of his. So an advisor of his was involved in a sex scandal, and essentially it's called the Rick Jacobs scandal. That's the name of his key aide. So this was seen as sort of Garcetti looked the other way. I mean, that was allegation, and he did not act. Whereas Garcetti denied, saying that he did not know anything about the alleged misconduct. But his opponents in the political circuit, they took on this particular issue and they continuously tried to stall his appointment, saying that he was unfit to lead an office of an ambassador if he has this sort of track record. So that's the reason, despite the US administration's attempts to get a confirmation from the Senate, from the US Congress, which is a mandatory requirement for appointment of ambassadors in the US system, it never could get through. But finally, that hurdle was overcome last week when the Senate Foreign Relations Committee cleared his name, and now the US Senate has cleared his name.
Right, and Shubhajit, before we talk more about Garcetti's appointment, can you briefly tell us how an ambassador to India is chosen by the US government?
Ambassador to India can be of two kinds. One could be a career diplomat who is basically from the US Foreign Service. And the other one is usually a political appointee who may be a retired foreign service officer or academic or a politician. So these are the kind of people who are usually chosen by the US administration to come to India. So political appointees have been much more in the last 20 years than before. So political appointments are essentially seen as someone who has the ear of the White House, essentially, and who has influence in White House, and which is beyond the US State Department. So that's where their political connection or political heft has a leverage which usually career diplomats, unless they're stars in their batch and in their service, unless they're of that profile, usually political appointments work better than career diplomats. But there is a debate over that. If you could talk to a US American diplomat, some might disagree with this sort of theory. They might say, no, a career diplomat is equally good or even better because they understand the system in the State Department and the White House and the diplomatic landscape better than a political appointee.
And so could you talk about how does having a political appointee like Garcetti as the ambassador help the US-India relationship?
So political appointee, because he or she has the confidence of the US president directly, has access to the White House officials directly. So from India's perspective, that's a very key quality, a trait, network, access, leverage to have. So essentially, if India wants to convey something directly to the US president or the US National Security Advisor, the US ambassador to India can be asked to convey that message, and he can pick up that phone and get that message across to the White House and the senior officials, the senior staff in the administration. Vice versa, the US ambassador as a political appointee is also useful because if he can cultivate and develop relationship in the upper levels, higher levels of the Indian government, for example, the Prime Minister's office or the National Security Advisor's office or National Security Advisor himself. So then anything important that the US administration wants to convey to the Indian government can be conveyed at that highest level.
But it can also be a double-edged sword, right? I mean, India can easily have, let's say, a direct phone line to the White House via Garcetti. But doesn't it matter that the US can also try to interfere in India's internal matters via the ambassador if they are displeased about something?
Absolutely. So it works both ways. It cuts both ways because in diplomacy, the diplomats at that level, at the highest level, have to have access on both sides of in both capitals. And that's why he would be here. He could meet, depends on how he uses his network. But as a jazz pianist, I'm sure he will be quite popular here in Delhi. And yeah, absolutely. That might also end up, happen. But, more importantly, he would probably have that leverage that India and US need at a time when global challenges from the Russia-Ukraine war and the belligerence of China, they are forcing India and US to cooperate and collaborate and, talk to each other despite their differences in the relationship or divergences in views. They need to have a frank, straight conversation going at the highest level, and a political appointee might help in greasing the wheels and helping that conversation take forward.
And lastly, Shubhajit, we know that Garcetti is a proper Biden loyalist. What do you think that means for India?
So if the two countries have to have a partnership, and if they say that, because they say that they're natural allies and natural partners, so in that kind of scenario, confidence of Biden for a US ambassador will be extremely important in moving the relationship at a pace that both sides would want to have, would want to take it forward. And that is, I think, going to be the biggest asset for Garcetti, who is seen as a pure loyalist of Joe Biden.
And in the end, we talk about the possible deportation of Indian students from Canada. More than 700 Indian students who went to Canada after 2018-2019 are facing deportation because the country found out that their college admission letters were fake. These students got the admission letters and visas through a Jalandhar-based consultancy agency and have already finished their studies in Canada and have even started working there. And after living and working there for years, they are facing the possibility of being deported back to India. To know how this scam was discovered and how students could study despite fake admission letters, we speak to the Indian Express's Anju Agnihotri Chaba. So Anju, can you first tell us about how these students got these fake admission letters?
Yeah, it's quite strange for us also that how it had happened. According to these students, that what had happened that when they started applying for a study visa in Canada, so they contacted this agency called Immigration Migration Services. The office of this agency is in Jalandhar, and they took the name of one Brijesh Mishra, who is running this consultancy. So they applied here 2018 onwards. So after fulfilling all the things, like they got what the documents required for this, after depositing everything, so they got the offer letter from the college in Canada, and then they have to deposit 1 year fees, and on that basis they need to apply for the visa, and then they get visa from the embassy. So each student, they said that they were charged something between 16 to 20 lakh per student, and this includes their 1 year fees, then their living expenses, and their traveling expenses were not included in this portion. So students, they said that they got the offer letter of a public college in Canada, but when they reached there, the consultant, he called upon them and he told them that their admissions got cancelled because of the non-availability of the seats. So they have to wait either for the 6 months or they can get admission in some other private colleges. So most of the students, they thought that instead of wasting 6 months, they should take admission in some other private colleges. So this is how it had happened. Like that person either forced the document himself or he connived with some Canada-based colleges. Like it is a part of investigation now.
But they went to Canada in 2018, 2019, right? So why is this coming to light now?
Yeah, true. So the problem came when the older students, those who went there in 2018-19, they completed their studies, and students, they also get work hours there because it is legal. They can work for some hours in any country, those who are going on study basis. So similarly in Canada, they were working. And after completing their studies, when they have to apply for the PR, like every student who completes their study over there, they are eligible for applying permanent residency. So when they applied for this PR, at the time of PR, a lot of scrutiny take place. And when the Canadian agency, I think, when they were scrutinizing their documents, so at that time, it came into light that these students got the fake offer letter from the college, because after reaching there and after getting admission in other colleges, these students have never updated either the Canadian government or the Indian officers in Canada that it had happened with them, and now they are going to take admission in some new college.
And this fact that the students have to inform the government if they change their college, does the responsibility lie with the students or the agency which got them admitted to a different college?
I think it is both ways, because at the first place, the consultancy or the agent should inform to the government there that it has happened, that the admission got cancelled due to one or other reason. But when something like legal is not happening, so why would agent would do that? So in that case, the ultimate responsibility is of the students, because ultimately they are the victim of these things. They are going to become the victim of this thing. So I don't know in this case why students, either they were not aware about this thing or they had done deliberately. It is yet to be investigated by this Canadian Border Security Agency, which had issued the deportation letters to them, because the student should have brought it into the notice of the government, either of India side or the Canadian side, when the agent was not doing that.
So Anju, these students went to Canada after receiving an admission letter from a college, and then their agent told them to switch to a different college. But didn't that raise suspicion among the students?
I spoke one of the girl students there, and she told me that now all the students together there, so they are discussing all the pros and cons of this thing. So she was telling me that majority of the students, they were not aware, like they have to inform about it to any of the government officials there. I asked the same question about why when they got to know that they are not getting admission in the same college, so was not there any doubt in their mind? So she told me that there was, but most of the students, they took it in casual way. They thought that after all, they are studying in the Canadian college, so there would be no need of updating this record.
Right, and while this is being investigated by Canada, the students are thinking of challenging their possible deportation. Could you talk about what is happening with that challenge?
Yeah, they told me that they have spoken to their parents here, and their parents have yet to complain about this case to Jalandhar police, because they said that their parents have asked them to take some advice from the lawyers in Canada so that they can file a case in the court and giving all these reasons that what had happened to them. So they said that because of that, they are not going to do any police complaint at the moment. So they are just consulting the lawyers over there.
Okay, and what about the consultancy agency that helped the students with the admission letters and the visas? Are they being investigated as well?
Yeah, definitely, because students, they just apply. They don't know about anything, like most of the students. That is why they go to the consultants, so that they can facilitate that to them. And it is also learned from the internal sources of the police department, though they have not registered any case formally, but they are investigating, that they have come to know that this agent, when these students, they'll reach there, so when he called them and asked them either to wait or take admission in some new college, he himself facilitated these students to get admission in the new colleges, facilitated to most of the students. And in lieu of that, he charged from them 5 to 6 lakh. Like he returned their fees after keeping 5 to 6 lakh amount with himself. So it means the entire involvement was that person only. And the student told me that when they were applying, so a lot of documentation is required. So she told me that when they were signing these documents, so everywhere students were made to sign as if they are applying themselves. They are not applying through this agency. So the agent had not signed anywhere. And now on all those documents which they had submitted at the time of seeking visas, so everywhere there was student's signature. So it is difficult for them to prove the innocence in that case, because when I'm going and I'm applying, no third person is between, and because there is no legal thing with me to prove that yes, I sought the help from this person. Because everywhere I am doing myself, and I am signing all the documents. So I was the self-applicant in that case.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Anwiti Singh. It was written and produced by me, Anwiti Singh, with the help of Utsa, Sarmin and Shashank Bhargava. It was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcast and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.